Okay, so I think we're live. So happy British Science Week and welcome to the third in our series of live broadcasts about STEAM, focusing on a different aspect of STEAM each day. So that's science, technology, engineering, arts, maths and medicine. I am Dr Alice Mills, one of the founders and directors of Exeter Science Centre. And today is E for Engineering Day, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Adam Feldman, who is a senior lecturer in renewable energy at the University of Exeter on the Penryn campus. So Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I've got lots of questions for you. But firstly, you've had a very unusual path into engineering, and we'd just love to hear about how you got where you are and what you do now.
Yes, well, I've come from a very strange background into engineering. I'm in my mid-50s now, and I spent the first 25 years of my career as a doctor, a medical doctor, a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon, which, if we're going to be totally fair, is really a kind of engineering. It's engineering of the human body. But it's extremely strange for somebody who's worked their way to the top in medicine as a hospital consultant surgeon to then at one point decide, I want to go off and follow my passion, inventing other engineering gadgets. And it all goes back to when I was a young boy. I grew up in the amazing industrial engineering city of Birmingham and spent every spare moment looking at the industrial past in the museums, admiring engines at one end of the scale and then science and medical discoveries at the other. And it was all so amazing. I knew I had to work somewhere in the area of what we call STEM or STEAM nowadays. And I trained. It was very good. I loved my years as a medical doctor. I did my medical degree, taught human anatomy, and then rapidly worked my way through to being a hospital consultant, putting in hip joints, knee joints, mending broken people. And my consultant post was up in a beautiful part of the country. I'm in beautiful Cornwall now, but I was up in Lancaster and the Lake District, and I would move between my hospitals in Lancaster, which was my main base, but I'd go through the countryside to work in the Lake District once or twice a week. And as I moved between hospitals and operating theatres, I started to see large wind turbines going up. And these were remarkable. They were huge devices. I couldn't believe that people could design, build and run such amazing gadgets. And I've always thought wind turbines look totally beautiful. And I'd stop off. I'd sometimes be very slightly late to my outpatient clinic because I'd be stopping off watching people building these machines, which even 20 years ago, the nacelle, which is the box you see at the top of a wind turbine, could easily have 25 people comfortably sitting around a table eating inside that box. They were so big, and I loved these wind turbines and the thought of these providing us with our electricity. And then for my birthday, my wife got me an amazing present. She bought me a week studying wind turbine technology at the Centre of Alternative Technologies, CAT, in Machynlleth, which is a beautiful mid-Wales town, very famous for renewable energy. So I went off and I studied wind turbines and didn't really think much more of it. I thought, well, I'm a surgeon, and I carried on really enjoyably doing my surgery until my wife, who's also a surgeon, got her consultant post. And we moved back to Cornwall where we'd met. And I was looking after our young children. And then one day in the library, I discovered you could study renewable energy engineering at a branch of the University of Exeter in Cornwall, near to Falmouth. In fact, in the town of Penryn. I thought, I just have to do that. So I asked my family, do you mind if I go off and become a student again? And they said, absolutely fine. That sounds brilliant to us. So I went off and I found myself on a degree course studying engineering, specifically renewable energy engineering. The course that the University of Exeter runs, which began in 2003, was Europe's first bespoke, specific degree course to study renewable energy engineering. And there I found myself amongst 40 equally interested students, of which at least a third of them were people like me in their 30s, 40s, and even 50s, and 30 out of the 40 young 18, 19-year-old enthusiastic school leavers. And we had a whale of a time learning about energy engineering. And these days, now that I teach on the very course I studied, I find myself using medical and orthopedic, that's bones and joints engineering, to help teach energy engineers. And the medical school sometimes invites me to go and give lectures to the medical students. And I find myself using my current energy engineering and power station engineering, wind and hydro engineering, to give examples to the doctors as to how the human body works. And you find that engineering is translatable from one area to another. But what this whole story tells you is, just because we head off into one career at one time doesn't mean to say we can't keep an open mind and really enjoy and study other areas of engineering. There I was enjoying, as a young lad, amazing inventions in the museums of technology and science that many towns have. It's what the Exeter Science Centre is all about, to give people, young people and not so young people, a real knowledge of everything that's out there and how amazing invention is.
Absolutely. You've had such amazing fun. So, the country needs tens of thousands more engineers to meet the sort of STEM skills gap. And how would you encourage people to go into engineering? What would you say to encourage people?
Oh, well, that's an easy one. I'd tell them in the very room they're sitting, or the next room in their house, or if they're in the car, just take a moment to reflect and look around you. And you're absolutely surrounded by machinery. High-tech stuff like your mobile phone, your car, your engine, whether it's a fossil-fueled car or an electric car, your kettle even, your cooker, the timer units on there. We're surrounded by this kit. How we make vaccines for the COVID situation, our hospitals, our schools, the changing lights above us. And then stop and think, where did all of that come from? Because we only have to go back 100 years, and certainly 200 years, and none of this existed. Technology was completely, utterly different. And in that time, we, and I say we meaning all of us, have invented all this kit. And every single day, people are inventing stuff to improve our lives, make it more fun, make it easier, make it healthier, make it more enjoyable, and now, hopefully, make it less polluting and greener. And the amazing thing is that so many of people watching this think, well, that's fantastic. Aren't those scientists and engineers and people like that, and the people that help manage those scientists and engineers, aren't they brilliant? But then stop and think. Every single one of those people who made an invention, a development, or look after things in that area now, were once a child studying. And they had the potential to become the inventors, the creators, invent the internet, the web, the computers, the powertrain systems, the space rockets, the Mars rovers. Every single one of them was a school child learning maths, physics, English, music, languages, whatever. And they put together everything they learnt, and they weren't put off. And they thought, well, as long as I stay interested and study this stuff, I can build it and design it too.
So when I teach people like you as well, who changed career path partway through.
Never ever accept everything as being perfect. always, even if something is brilliant, when you boil your water in your saucepan on your hob and think that's working nicely, well, somebody's moved the hob on from a flame to an electric heater. I've now got one of these induction hobs, which is amazing, using magnetism to boil the water. And always say to yourself, can we do it better? And if you ask yourself that question, you are an engineer, because engineer comes from the Latin ingenium, meaning ingenious. And what engineering and science is all about is being ingenious and saying, isn't this stuff brilliant, but can I do it better? So it's in us all.
I love that. So why is the Southwest so good for renewable energy? You've mentioned before in our conversations that the Southwest really was a pioneer in renewable energy. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, the Southwest was a pioneer in engineering going back 200-300. In fact, the Southwest's partly responsible for the global warming mess we're in at the moment, because the steam engine, the first real reproducible power engine the man made, was invented in Dartmouth in Devon by Newcomen, the Newcomen atmospheric engine, the first workable steam engine developed by Thomas Newcomen around 1720. No sooner had he invented this machine, Cornwall needed engines to pump water out of their mines, and people were building Newcomen engines in Cornwall. They then spread off round Europe and to the rest of the world, the engine, and people, famously James Watt from Glasgow with his factory in Birmingham, improved the steam engine, but most of his first engines were sold to Cornwall and the adjacent part of Devon. And we were using engines before anyone else. And then came along Trevithick in Camborne in Cornwall and made the high power, smaller steam engine, put it on wheels and invented the first steam car and then the steam locomotive. So Cornwall, Devon are the energy starters of the world, part of the problem. But then bringing us right up to date, Cornwall, very much as a county, and Devon have moved us into the renewable energy age, because the 5 very first commercial wind farms for wind energy built in the UK were all in Cornwall. Delabole, which is a little town, a little village come town on the North Cornwall coast, not far from Tintagel, where King Arthur is supposed to have had his court, opened the UK's first commercial wind farm in 1990. Similarly, the UK's first commercial solar energy farms were installed in Cornwall. The very first was in central Cornwall at a place called Wheal Jane, and that opened in 2011. Then for geothermal energy in Britain, the deep geothermal, because rocks are very hot where you have granite, like on Dartmoor and the west side of Devon and throughout Cornwall. If you go down a few kilometres, it's 200 centigrade there. And we're working to get that heat out of the ground to drive power stations. And the UK's first deep geothermal systems are being built, one at the Eden project near St Austell, and the one that's leading the way is at a place called United Downs, fairly near to Redruth. But then superficial geothermal heat. Cornwall has the country's only ground source heat pump manufacturing company. They're called Kenza, a Cornish word that means small and beautiful. And the government has, of course, as many of you know, wants us to completely phase out fossil fuel house and building heating. So gas and oil boilers into new buildings will not be allowed in a few years' time. And the mainstay of replacing the boiler, as we know it, is the heat pump, whether it be something called a ground source or an air source heat pump. So they come from the southwest too. And Devon and Cornwall are surrounded by the sea, full of tides, tidal energy, another kind of renewable energy that we're constantly researching at the university, and wave energy, the power of just 1 meter length of our coastline, and we move these further out. There's enough wave energy there when facing the Atlantic to power a house, just 1 meter. And I just want you to think back to the wind turbines. The average wind turbine that drove me into renewable energy that I looked at was rated at 400 kilowatts. That powered 400 houses. Nowadays, each of our wind turbines on land that you look at, that you see, powers 2,000 homes. The ones at sea power 3,000 homes on average, and the latest ones to go in, the 15 megawatt turbines, which are now going up, they're just phenomenal. 150 meter diameter blades turning. They power 15,000 homes, each one of those. We have come on such an amazing way. As one small human being standing there looking at what we've achieved, it humbles you, and it fills you with delight seeing students study courses, learn, do their degrees, become registered engineers, and then go out and you chase them up after a year or two and you find they're working on these projects and inventing and improving them. It's a remarkable story.
It certainly makes me feel very proud to be in the Southwest. One thing I would say is that often when we think about fossil fuels and climate change, we feel a little bit pessimistic and gloomy and don't feel like we as individuals can actually make any difference. You know, we think, well, let the engineers make the change and, you know, let the governments make the change. But what can we realistically do in our own lives to make changes and make a difference with regard to renewable energy?
Well, I think first and foremost, have a belief in the system. Just look at how we've done. When I moved from being a hospital surgeon to being an engineer back in about 2008, what's that, 13 years ago, only 2% roughly of our UK electricity was made from renewable energy. We are now making more than 25%. It's heading towards 40% actually of all our electricity from renewable energy sources. And we even now, in the past year, on a windy, sunny summer's day, will find ourselves supplying nearly all our electricity at that time and those days in the UK from renewable energy.
That's brilliant.
We thought there was going to be a limit to it, and now we think, no, we can probably do it. We're doing really well in electricity. Now we have to swap our transport systems, predominantly from fossil fuels, onto renewables. In fact, when you fill up a petrol car, if you look at your pump at the moment, you will see there's a number E10 on the pump, E5 or E10, and that means that either 5% or 10% of your petrol hasn't come from an oil well, it's come from bioethanol. We must have 5% at the moment of all our petrol renewable, but most of them are changing to 10%. And similarly, if you look on a diesel pump, you will see B7, meaning biofuel 7. So 7% of our diesel that we put in our vehicles is renewable. Obviously, it's really interesting, and we want those numbers to go up and up and up. So eventually we can get rid of those numbers altogether, and we can, well, before we change all our petrol to renewables. In fact, if you go to Brazil, the cars don't run on fossil fuel petrol, they run all on sugarcane ethanol. But before we get there, we'll have changed our vehicles across to green electricity, either via battery or via what we call hydrogen fuel cells. which is something we're working on vastly. This is where you take green hydrogen, hydrogen made from renewable energy, electricity, wind turbines, electrolyzing water into hydrogen. We put the hydrogen into the tanks in the vehicles, and we use atmospheric oxygen, and we oxidize the hydrogen back, and we get electricity out. So we need to go over to transport as renewables, and very much heating and cooling throughout, which is our biggest use of energy as human beings around the world. But we're getting there. And as long as we remain confident in our engineers, confident in our scientists, confident in ourselves, willing to play our part, try to insulate our homes, try to control how much energy we use. We're here in the Southwest. I always like to say, just limit eventually your use of aeroplanes, even after the pandemic, because when a big jumbo takes off and it's 4 ginormous jet engine Brayton turbines, they're called, are perhaps chuntering away and getting us something. I love watching any engineering. I love seeing them take off. But do you know what? The rate of use of energy out of those 4 large jet engines is about the same energy that a city the size of Plymouth, with about 200,000 people, is using. So it puts it into context. Once the plane is up, it uses less to stay up once it's up. But on those crucial bits on takeoff and landing, the energy consumption is phenomenal. But don't worry, we're developing electric, renewable, and hydrogen fuel cell renewable aeroplanes. And very soon we'll see, for short hops, renewable energy aircraft there.
Oh, brilliant.
It's phenomenal. The changes are amazing. The Wright brothers, who first flew, would love to come back and see this. Isambard Brunel, who engineered so much in the Southwest, with the locomotives and the buildings of the railways, would come back and be delighted. These engineers, when you go to the engineering institutions, such as the Institution of Civil Engineering, or the IET, the Institute of Engineering and Technology, or the IMechE, Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and you stand in these ancient halls where great people like Brunel and the Stephensons from the railways, and the other Stephensons who built the lighthouse, and John Smeaton who built Eddystone Lighthouse, and every other famous engineer, bridge builder, you name it, stood. If they came back today, they'd be working on changing our technologies just as we are now. They'd love it. They'd love it. The opportunity to spend your life creating or contributing to a change in the world is brilliant. And we all have to get to the end of our life one day. And if you can get to the end of your life and sit there and look back and think, I changed a bit of that, or I helped with a bit of that, wasn't that fantastic? Or I helped stimulate people to do some of this engineering or change. It's made your own individual contribution worthwhile. And that's how I like to look at it, and try to stimulate everyone to take part. And this is where the Exeter Science Centre will come in, because if you show the beauty of science, engineering, every little bit of it, to people, and the artistry in that engineering and science, people can't help but be driven along with enthusiasm to take part. So do join in.
Thank you so much, Adam. That has been absolutely fascinating and very motivating. So thank you ever so much, and thank you everybody who's been watching live, and I hope some more people will get to see this later, because Adam, you are so enthusiastic and passionate, and it's a real gift. Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.
It's been lovely. It's been lovely chatting with you, Alice, and everyone else out there.
Oh, thank you. Right, take care, everyone, and we'll have another live broadcast tomorrow. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Adam.
Bye.
Bye.